Now it's time to talk some birds.
I'm worried about cousin Joey.
He had shingles.
They're gone.
They're gone. He's good now.
All right, we're safe.
He said, dude, no joke.
It doesn't say it. I mean, it sounds terrible.
It does sound terrible.
Yeah.
He's like, let me tell you something. It's one of the worst things. He goes, freaking painful. He was out at a concert. He said, I went to a concert. And he goes, dude, I was in bad, like I was hurt, man. So,
yeah, I do not envy cousin Joey. I'm glad he's doing better.
Yeah, no, he's good now.
Okay.
Yeah, so thank God.
Thank you, Rite Aid.
Yeah. So big news yesterday, and I love the fact, Bo, you come on.
Yeah, let's
breaking
go.
news. That was awesome. All right, I loved it. So you get Devonta locked up. My question to you is, who is Devonta? Like, who is he? Now, obviously, you're sharing the spotlight and the number one status with a guy like A.J. Brown. So who is Devonta in your eyes?
I think that Devonta is capable of being a number one, a one guy, but I think probably more likely in that like 1B category. Whereas like if they traded AJ Brown, I would feel confident that Devontae's numbers would rise and he could handle that load, but you would need somebody else next to him to become the number two guy. And I actually think if you think about the timing of this, what is interesting is not just, okay, now you're set up for Devonta and AJ have been paid. They don't necessarily need to fight for targets. But a week before the draft, if they're at the top of the board in the first or second round and a wide receiver is there and they know that guy can add a little bit of juice to the offense, now that you have paid Devonta, you don't have to worry about necessarily what his reaction to that would be. He's not going to be fighting for targets next season since he's already been paid. And so if like the board falls a certain way and a wide receiver is who they want in the first or second round, you have at least taken care of the potential for discord behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you would be shocked if a wide receiver comes.
In the first round, I would be shocked.
Yeah.
But shocked is not, like, that's what they care about. And they know that the path for them, they think, is to have an elite offense and to have just a fine defense. And so,
dude, and you know what? They're not wrong because we talk about this a lot, right? And I love defense. I know you love defense. Like,
yeah, of course.
Like if you're from Philadelphia, were kind of raised defensively. Jim Johnson, the whole thing. It's just a part of the region, right? The offense wins. Now I know Kansas City won with Spags' defense. It's great, but if you're going to go and choose one side of the ball to be better, you choose offense.
And not only does offense sort of matter a little bit more, the reason it does in the big picture is because it's much more consistent. You look at like year over year, the top 5, top 10 offenses remain close to the same. Defense is so variable year over year. Like Spags' defense this year was awesome. A year ago, they weren't very good. And there's just a lot of volatility year to year on defense. And so that's what part of the reason why if you're going to build around something, it makes more sense to build around
sustainability is huge when it comes to that. So let's talk about it for a second because it always comes back to Jalen. Like if you look at last year, right? And you look at now, Brian Johnson was a disaster. Nick didn't help out the offense.
Sure.
We talk about the lack of movement, right? We look at, we talk about elemental things like the hot
routes
reads.
are the same.
Right.
Just like one-on-one guys on the outside. Let's have a little bit of communication between the routes.
There's no creativity in the offense. Everything we saw the year before with Steichen just kind of dissipated, and they were still potent, but then you saw it kind of fall off the cliff.
Totally.
And this goes back to, I think, Jalen. The key to everything is Jalen and getting Jalen back to where he was 2 years ago.
And maybe for them, what they learned is that like Jalen is not the guy who is Patrick Mahomes and is going to lift everybody else around him. He needs a little bit more to be supported by. And so maybe you go get Saquon Barkley, you pay for that. Maybe you do add another weapon in the passing game on the first 2 days of the draft so that teams can't just focus on A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. There are more options for him. And if he's not going to be the same running threat that he was 2 years ago, then they probably do need a little bit more help in the passing game.
You reconcile this for me. In that Super Bowl, he was
the best game I've ever seen.
Incandescent. Like he was the touch he had. Like that whole year, he displayed a touch that I didn't think he had.
That game, I mean, by far the best game that I have ever seen him play.
He was unbelievable.
I close my eyes and think of watching that game from the press box, and the one play that, like, over and over I can just picture in my mind is the one where he's rolling to his right and threads it to Dallas Goedert.
Yes.
Just like the tightest window possible.
Yes.
And Goedert makes a beautiful catch on the sideline. They have to check it, but it is a catch. That pass was insane. He was so good in that game, and that's why there's a recency bias to it, because you enter the next season, you're like, that's his level of play. He went toe to toe with Patrick Mahomes. This is who he is now. And it doesn't always work like that. Development is not just a straight curve. So there's bumps along the way. But like, we've seen that level of play from him. I'm sure that like Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman's number one thought process is, how do we get him back to that level?
Well, and that's what I keep seeing in my mind. And I didn't see that last year, right? And you say he was Folesian in that Super Bowl, right? He was that ridiculous. Last year, some of the habits were worrisome, right? Like leaving the pocket too soon.
Totally.
Right? Seeing some ghosts, eyes down instead of up. What's the word? Like, what are you hearing about that piece? Because I don't know that then we're going to get to the draft in a second, but how much, we don't really talk as much about that. And that to me is the key, that the whole thing.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of this is just sort of like human nature. Like, he plays that game, the most important game of his life, plays the best game of his life. And, there's the story of he's got his cell phone background of like walking off the field in disappointment. This guy's going to be so motivated, although he just, he gets paid. And you wonder, like, the come down from that, it is a long road to get back there. And I know that, like, Jalen Hurts will tell you, and everybody around you will tell him, or around him will tell you that, like, this guy is as dedicated to the process as anybody. Yeah. But, like, that's a long road. And maybe it is, week 3 against the Rams or whoever it is. Like, you don't necessarily have the same juice as you did in the Super Bowl. And maybe you get away from the things that work, and you get a little bit lazy.
Yeah. And listen, I mean, this is where Kellen Moore, a fresh voice.
Yeah.
I thought that was a good hire. I like the hire. So I'm thinking fresh voice. You got a new weapon. That excites me for the future of Jalen.
Yeah, and we hear that Kellen Moore is all about motion, right? Like, that's something that they want to add. I still have like real questions about how much of the offense is going to be Kellen Moore's versus Sirianni's. What's the melding of that? I don't think we're going to really know the answer to that until early in the season. But there's no doubt that they needed a fresh perspective.
Was that Steichen's offense or Nick's offense?
I think my general take is that, like, in totality, we probably don't give Nick enough credit for the 2022 offense. He would say, and Shane would say, that it's like Sirianni's menu, but Steichen's calling the plays. Yeah. I do think that he needed the perspective of someone who he trusted a little bit more. Like, I know that he likes Brian Johnson, but I think that probably knowing that it was a tight turnaround, a quick off season, that he probably felt like he was being a little bit more, he needed to meddle a little bit more than he did with Shane. He didn't trust Brian quite as much, I think.
Big story of the day brought to you by TrueMark Financial Credit Union. Find for yourself the TrueMark Credit Union difference. So let's look at draft, and where are we at? All the talk is obviously the offensive line and the fact that you can get a guard to play this year and push him out to tackle in the future.
Yeah. Now,
there's a lot of great, it's deep when it comes to that.
It is. Zach and I went through this exercise on the show yesterday, trying to sort of stack what we think the Eagles board might look like.
Yeah.
And it actually made things clarifying for me that, like, the odds of them sticking at 22 and getting somebody that they really love, I'm not so sure that's going to happen. Like, the tackles, you talk to people around the league, they're going to go off the board early.
There's going to be a run on them. You can see it.
Like, and if they really want a guy, they might have to trade up for him. And I don't think that trading up, if it's going to cost a second-round pick, is going to be worth it in this draft class. I also don't think that you can stick at 22 and get a lockdown corner, unless you really love Cooper DeJean. I think we talked about that last week. And so it might end up being they take one of the guys who's just a tackle and has to sit, and nobody's excited about that. Like, it's Tyler Guyton or Amarius Mims, or they try to trade back, Or maybe it is that like wide receiver is at the top of their board, and they think, if Brian Thomas of LSU is there, he adds this juice like that. We're going to get more out of that.
That would blow my mind.
He would, right?
Receiver.
And I don't think he's going to be there either because I think he's pretty good.
Yeah, he's very good.
But I think there's a chance that we might end up a little bit just disappointed from what comes out of it.
Really? No, because I agree with you. I think there's going to be a trade. So let's talk about. So we know just off the bat that Tennessee's going to take a tack. They're going to take an offensive lineman.
Sure.
Right? You got to believe that Atlanta's possible to take an offensive lineman. The Chargers, Harbaugh is possible to take an offensive lineman. Right?
Offensive lineman, wide receiver, corner. That's what everybody wants.
I know.
Like those are the positions that are going to go. And so, would you rather have the 8th offensive lineman off the board or the third corner off the board?
Yo, sir. Listen.
I don't know.
Like, what about Wiggins?
I like Wiggins.
I mean, he's fast.
He's super fast. He's really good in man-to-man coverage. I don't know if he's the Eagles type. Like, he's not Vic Fangio's type from what I can tell. He's not as physical as Fangio might want. He's not quite as experienced in zone. But I think you could see yourself talking yourself into this is the guy who is like the best athlete at the position. Like covering man-to-man is the most valuable thing that a corner can do. And so he seems like the guy who would be like, we're at 22. The board has not fallen exactly how we like. We don't have a good offer to move back. Let's sort of hold our nose and take Nate Wiggins.
Yeah, I think the same thing. I think that they're going to – I think it's listen, we've seen it every year that they trade up. It's this portion of the Anthony Gargano Show is brought to you by Rite Aid. Head to your local Rite Aid store today for all of your goods and pharmacy needs. Bo Wulf from our All PHLY Eagles show, who is fantastic with Zach Berman with us. I keep coming back to it, and it keeps coming back to trade, right? Like it's all about trade. I think you almost have to move up.
Yeah. Now the flip side is like the reason that Howie Roseman has been so willing to trade up in recent years is because he's already been up high enough so that it didn't take much to move up where he needed to get.
Now you're at 22.
Now you're at 22. If you want to get to 15 or something, it's probably going to cost you a second-round pick.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there's anybody in this class who's going to be there for them that's worth a first and a second, right? So you hope that somebody slides, and if not, maybe you move back and you get a little bit extra. You get a third-round pick, and you sort of just go volume.
What about any of these offensive linemen you think could be there 15 to 18? I mean, there are a lot of them.
There are a lot of them. So, Joe Alt will be off the board, right?
Yeah, he's gone.
Fashanu is going to be off the board,
Yep.
I imagine. Although I do think that he's a guy who might appeal to them as a possible trade-up candidate.
Yeah, but I don't think I think he goes before. Did you say 15? I think he goes before that.
Troy Fautanu from Washington is the guy who sort of fits the template of Stoutland's movement skills and could play guard right away and eventually move to right tackle, you think.
Fuaga's gone too, by the way.
Fuaga's probably gone. Although I hear some people in the league are not as enamored with him as like the media seems to be. But he's a guy who's not he's not a movement guy, he's a mauler, right? And so I don't know if that's Stoutland's type either. Then you get to like Tyler Guyton and Amarius Mims, who are these monstrous developmental tackles only. And like
Latham's there too.
Now Latham is the guy, and Zach has talked a lot about Latham. I think Latham is the guy who, if they're going to move up 4 or 5 spots, he makes sense to me.
Yeah.
There's the obvious Stoutland Alabama connection. He has the guard tackle versatility. He has like the rare size that Stoutland might covet. He is the guy who seems like the most Eaglesy to me.
Eagles, I like that.
Yeah,
Eaglesy, I like that a lot. Tell me about Steen, because the fact that there's all this talk, right, tells me that they're cool on Steen.
So there's the thing that happened at the owners' meetings, right? It's the breakfast press conference. It's like 8:30 in the morning. Nick Sirianni is asked about his plans for right guard, and he forgets to mention Tyler Steen. So on the one hand, like the guy's tired. It's 8:30. We're not always saying the right things at 8:30 in the morning. You can forgive that.
Or at 9:40.
Right, exactly. Not a big deal. At the same time, if the head coach is going to bed at night thinking about his offensive line and he has a right guard in mind,
Should be front
he's
load.
not going to forget that
Right.
guy's name when he's
Right.
talking about the guys who are competing. So I don't think that Tyler Steen is like out of the picture. But I think you saw last year, didn't trust him right away. I mean, they needed a right guard, and Sua Opeta is playing over him. And I like Sua Opeta, but they let Sua Opeta leave in free agency, right? So it's not like they view him as a stud starting caliber guard. And so there are real questions about Tyler Steen here. Guys are allowed to develop. It takes some time along the offensive line. He was switching positions, switching sides. I think it's okay to still believe in him, but I think it's also fair to say they do not view him as the week one starting right guard for sure. I think they would like to add some competition.
Is there anybody right here, depth-wise, right now on the roster that you say, you know what, he could be your guy for, the next season or two?
So Matt Hennessy, who they signed in free agency, is a guy who, was drafted on day 2 by the Falcons, has had real trouble staying healthy and is coming off an injury that cost him all season last year. Can play center and guard, obviously played at Temple, so there's a local connection.
Yep.
I think like if he stays healthy, it's a big if. He could be a starter. He's a starting caliber player, but I don't think that they're viewing him as the guy just because, he hasn't been able to stay healthy.
And then the other piece we talk about that we haven't talked about is anybody off the edge that strike. Like, because listen, we know that offensive line, tackle, corner, and edge.
No doubt.
Right? That's what this draft is strong in.
And I think there are, like, if you talk about the tackles are going to go, the top corners are going to go, the wide receivers are going to go. It is possible that, like, let's say Laiatu Latu, teams don't take him off their board because of medical concerns, and the Eagles clear him. I think that's possible. Now, I don't love the idea of you sign Bryce Huff, you trade Hassan Reddick, then you use a first-round pick on the edge, and you're backfilling, and there's not enough snaps to go around. I don't love that use of resources, but I could see being talked into Latu there. The other one, and I think this is like a little bit off the board, and Zach and I disagree about this a little bit. Like, could they take a defensive tackle for the 3rd year in a row? If Byron Murphy is
I know,
the best
I think
guy
about
on the board,
he's Eaglesy, to be honest.
He is, and he's a good fit for playing next to Jordan Davis, right?
Yes,
and
because he can get to the quarterback. He's got wiggle. He's got a lot of. He's got that
you
quick.
Think that the offenses are going to focus on Jalen Carter,
yes.
Right? They're going to double team Jalen Carter. And Jordan Davis, you've decided after 2 years he doesn't have the pass.
Yeah, Murphy's out of Texas. I love him.
What's going to happen on 3rd down? You want to get this guy singled up in the middle? Yeah, I think that's possible.
I know. Isn't it crazy? Like, you think about it, like they could actually go tackle again.
3 years in a row after using a 3rd round pick on Milton Williams, who was good.
I know. I need to see more though. This is his year.
I think so.
Sweat and to me, Sweat and Milton Williams, you need to step up.
Well, Milton, that is a position, and to be fair to Jordan Davis, defensive tackles do usually take some time, more so than other positions. And so, Milton Williams is going into his 4th year, bigger role this year.
Yeah.
I would say that I am more bullish on like seeing more from Milton Williams this year than I am seeing Josh Sweat take a leap to what he's already shown.
Yeah, I feel you. Bo, great stuff as always. We'll be watching a little bit later on, 11 o'clock.
Noon today.
Noon.
We're having Devin Jackson from the Inquirer to talk about safeties today.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Safeties and linebackers.
And then this afternoon, we talked to Devonta Smith and Howie Roseman.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic. We'll be watching. Bo Wulf. Make sure you watch him. Follow him. He is terrific. He and Zach Berman.